Thank you, everybody, for taking up to 90 minutes out of your day today. Welcome. This is one of our 6 weeks, give or take a few days, webinars with the ASI. This one is going to be unusual because since the inception of the ASI, we've been thinking about learning together. How do we create community? What are the issues that have supported bad practice in spiritual leadership traditionally? And if we look at what supports bad practice, rather than blaming where we've gone astray, what we've found is that many spiritual leaders have said, I have nobody to talk to. There's nobody that I can share this with. Everybody I talk to sees me as the teacher, and my humanness has nowhere to be expressed. I can't go to a psychotherapist because there are subtle layers of consciousness that I need to bring in to my supportive environment. And this has been, you know, even Ramana Maharshi, like, who died in 1950, if you're not aware of him, he was an Indian sage. He said, there's nobody I can talk to, repeatedly, it's quoted in his documents. And so this isn't a new phenomenon. And so within the ASI, when we started to look at, like, well, what's given rise to bad practice? One of the key things is the absence of peer support. And so rather than go, okay, let's adopt the psychotherapy model, or let's adopt the counseling model, or let's adopt that model and make that fit, it won't fit because our work is different. And so what we would like to do is collaborate with our community to create a model that's appropriate for us, that would be evolving as we mature. And this is our first, outside of the core ASI administration, this is our first request for information. Now, while this was in the back of our head, it was like, okay, how are we going to take on another project? Because as you know, there's just a few of us who are administratively working for the ASI in addition to our own full-time jobs. And out of the blue, I got an email from Tom Murray. And I'm going to introduce Tom to you because Tom is spearheading
blue up
this initiative. Tom has a blue mug and an orange top with a black waistcoat. There he is. And so Tom is spearheading this. And I think any project of the ASI seems to be well, somebody has to spearhead it. And then let's support as a community and see how it works. And so what I'm asking of you all today is to contribute whatever arises. And in order to make space for each person, we're going to break into breakout rooms twice. So you'll be broken up into small groups in order to make sure that we can go deeper, because we need your thoughts, your feelings, your advice, your brainstorming. We need your input so that we can begin to design what peer support models might look like. So this webinar will be a little bit more interactive, and I would really appreciate if you guys can stay with us and contribute. And so one day Tom emailed, and here's Tom.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah, good. I'm not always sure my mic works. Thanks, Jack. Yeah, so I'll give a little background on how I started thinking about this stuff, and I got in touch with Jack a couple of years ago. So the idea for the project first came to me while I was at the Science and Non-Duality Conference in 2019. Maybe many of you were there also. It was my first SAND conference, and I was presenting some of my work on wisdom and ego development. And I do work in cognitive science and computer science, and integral philosophy. But I also have some experience in conflict resolution and dialogue, group processing, and ethics theory. And so I was really interested to hear the presentations describing what you guys are doing with the Association for Spiritual Integrity and the mission that you have for yourselves. And I learned about the code of ethics that you're developing for students and teachers, which seemed really important. And I also had this vision of peer support groups, based on, some of my experience in the past, and had some conversations with Jack and other board members, and that gradually led us to where we are now, to wanting to prototype some of these ideas. And as Jack said, these are, this kind of idea was percolating in the back of her mind and other people's minds already, but it was kind of on the back burner, and she was happy to have somebody stepping forward to kind of flesh out the details and help organize it. So, as Jack said, it definitely was clear to me back then that spiritual teaching and leadership and guidance can be very isolating. I'm not a spiritual teacher, but I have friends who are, and I've had, conversations with them about what that work is like. And yeah, so we have these systems of hierarchy that are in place for most kinds of leadership, kind of metaphors that we have for leadership and in our society. And it can be really difficult work and really difficult service. And, people have lots of expectations that they bring into it and projections onto the teachers and so forth. And it's, as Jack said, it's difficult to admit that you've made a mistake or that you're uncertain about something that's important. And of course, this is true for all kinds of leadership, but it's exacerbated for spiritual leadership for reasons that you are all, I think, pretty familiar with. So, clearly teachers and leaders should be held to high standards, but we're all human. And, that's one of the things that the ASI Code of Ethics makes really explicit, is that we're all human. So I've done some studying and writing in the area of ethics, and I know that the real work of ethics is not in articulating rules and principles in kind of an abstract way, but it's in the dilemmas that come up in real life situations where people are trying to balance and navigate, complexity and different perspectives coming in and different needs that people have. Just applying rules can be surprisingly complicated, and nuanced. I'm sure you all have experienced that. So, there are spiritual teachers who make flagrant violations of ethical principles, and don't seem to have a lot of remorse about that. And they should certainly be held responsible for what they do. But the folks that are drawn to the ASI and the Code of Ethics and so forth are, can be assumed to really want to do the right thing, and it's important to support students in making good choices with their, the kinds of spiritual teachers that they want to associate with. But ASI, as I understand, is mostly an association of teachers and leaders. So, and yeah, so it's more, so for the people that do kind of step in the door, it seems like what we want to do is provide safe spaces for people to talk about the confusing and gray areas in their life and the real complexities, and get support and good listening around that. So to give people safe environments where they can articulate what their own ethical standards are and their unique areas of challenge for them, and sort of get support living up to their own standards, and particularly in the areas that they identify as being more difficult. So like I said, I'm not a spiritual teacher, but I have, friends who confided in me, so I have some sense of some of the challenges here. But my main vision for this project is really inspired by men's groups that I've been in over many years. I feel really fortunate that I've been in circles of men and other groups too. I have like a dance community that I hang out with, which has some really good support in it too. But circles like this with people that really love each other and can be vulnerable, but also firmly point out the contradictions and inconsistencies, the shadow stuff that comes up, and really help each person be accountable for the ideals that they have for themselves. So, and I think Jack might share some of her experiences with a group too, a little later. And of course, not all groups are going to have, I feel lucky that the folks in my men's group right now have a pretty high level of skill, and we can really hold the space really well and share leadership. That's not always going to be the case in groups, and it takes time to build the kind of deep trust that we would like. But I think that these kinds of support groups are really helpful, even if there's just a minimal amount of trust and goodwill and some good facilitation there. So I'll describe a little bit about how we're seeing the details of this project right now. And again, it's very much a work in progress. A prototype. We're looking for people's advice, input. We want to start with just two or three groups, and learn as we go about how to do this and how to use the limited resources that we have. So we're thinking of 2 to 3 groups. Probably like one would be male identified people, another female identified people, and a third group mixed or unspecified gender, something like that. Just it depends on who comes forward and who's interested. But we want to prototype this for about 6 months and then see what comes next. Eventually, we want to have some written guidelines and ground rules, processes that we can sort of hand off to new groups to help them. Not a rigid framework, but maybe some suggestions and choices of different things you can do. Mostly we're picturing the groups being peer facilitated or self-facilitated, but we'd also like to support some scaffolding, facilitation to help people get started. And depending on how much volunteer work or funding that we have down the line for doing that. So the start is the vision of these 2 or 3 groups with 4 to 6 people in each one, and people would be committing to meeting a minimum of 8 times, and it would be regular meetings anywhere from every 2 weeks to every 2 months, something in that range, for a minimum of 8 meetings. And each group would have 1 or 2 point persons who would also participate in check-in kind of meetings with us, so that we can really get a sense of how things are going and all learn together as we're doing this. So there would be these point people would be having additional meetings after the first, the 4th and the 8th meetings. That's kind of the structure as we're currently thinking about it. Like I said, nothing is set in stone. We do have some volunteers who are willing to help facilitate groups to sort of ramp them up if that's needed, over time, so that they can be, more fully self-facilitated. That's pretty much it. Jack and I put together a survey to gather the names of people who are interested, and also looking for pointers to other resources and ideas, sharing concerns that you have. And we're also interested in hearing from other spiritual communities or intentional communities, or even like different kinds of professional communities who've designed their own structures to support leaders and to help them be in integrity. So maybe later we might have time, but I can sort of show you that survey just so you get a sense of the kind of questions we're asking. But we want to sort of branch out beyond this group just to see if there are other people out there who have success stories or failure stories or whatever that we can learn from. So yeah, that's the picture that we have so far. I guess, Jack, should we ask for like clarifying questions? If there's anything, we don't want to get too deeply into a discussion right now. We want to have you guys kind of get in breakout groups and dive in, and then come back from the breakout groups and have a discussion then. But just for now, if there are any kind of clarifying questions.
Unmute yourself, Jack.
If there's no questions, I just want to give an example of one thing one situation that's happening. 2 years ago, another spiritual teacher contacted me and a group of women and said she'd like to set up a women's circle. We've been meeting every month. There's about 15 of us in it. I haven't been sanctioned to tell you who the members are. There are some in Australia, there's a few in Europe, UK, and quite a few in the US, mostly in California. Some very well-known female teachers and some that I hadn't met beforehand. I didn't know of beforehand. And 2 years down the line, now we're talking, the last 2 meetings, we're talking about what are you getting out of this? And how does it work for you? And why does it not work for you? And at the very last meeting, it's like, we don't have a leader. We're doing this without a leader, without a facilitator. And so, we're kind of doing it a very feminine way. Nobody wants to kind of say, like, maybe we should structure it. Maybe we should have like a check-in so that everybody's voice is heard at the beginning of the meeting. No, maybe we should have silence. Actually, I have too much silence in my life. I want to talk. And so all the needs are now beginning to come out 2 years later. And so we will now be putting some kind of structure on it, I think. How is that going to work without a leader? I'm not sure that's going to work. But that's one model that's very slowly cooking. One thing is for sure is that it is hugely valuable for all 15 of us. Hugely valuable. Sometimes it breaks up into 2 because we can't make the meeting this month. Let's meet a little subgroup because it's so important. We're willing to initiate sub meetings to support each other. And so that's one experience that I'd like to share to give you an example of something that's out there. And I know Catherine Bell also, Catherine, you're here, emailed and said that she has a peer soup meeting that meets monthly. Catherine, would you be okay with sharing just a few ideas around that process?
Yes, absolutely. We've been meeting for, quite a few years now. It's evolved over time. We are also not facilitated. We're just group facilitated. We do have a check-in so everybody's voice is present, and that's, I think, a helpful thing. Just go around the circle. We start with a meditation, kind of a grounding, breath awareness meditation, and then we do individual check-ins, and then people will, during their check-in or even in advance, will send us an idea of topics that we want to talk about. And then we go through the topics as a 2-hour meeting every other week. And it's very valuable for those of us who are there. The attendance varies. We have like between four or five people typically. But we have we pull from a pool of about 15 people, similar to yours, but not everybody is a regular attendant. It's all organized around dreams, because we're all dream work practitioners. We're all dream coaches and dream group leaders and dream facilitators. So we have that particular topic in common. It's mixed gender, just people who are interested in dreams, who've been working with them. And I find it's very valuable. Like I said, it's been quite a few years that we've been doing this. And I wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning on Sundays, every other Sunday, because it's so valuable to me. And we wanted to make it easy for people in other time zones to attend. So there's some of the highlights. In fact, 2 of the people in my peer stoop are here today on my invitation, because this group is something that's, the ASI is something that's been growing importance for me, and the peer supervision is another group that I really love, and so I invited people. So there are 2 folks here who are also part of that group, Chris Thomas and Tom Whalen. So thank you so much for everything you guys offer, and if there's more I can answer, I'd be happy to contribute more.
Catherine Schultz has a question. Catherine, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I've been facilitating an international women's spiritual leader group for, I think, about 7 years. Some in Australia, some in Scotland and Canada, but smaller, like 4 or 5 people. And I think because it's smaller and the feminine worked out, like we didn't have to have a formal leader. I think it kind of started out maybe for the first year, a little bit of me doing facilitation, but where we've landed is kind of a set day. And then, and again, it's more informal, I think, than what you're looking to do. So it was like how our lives flowed. We would know we have a standing date. And then we really ended up being around what the meme is of the moment, the meme of the moment. So that way, and we started out also with conscious inquiry, like we called it seeing with the CII, a little twist on the conscious inquiry type of thing. But we wanted to ground it in what was emerging for each of us in the moment, and then seeing how the interpersonal and the personal intersected. And, so that way your conscious inquiry, the self in the field, looks at the meme of the moment. And it's always fascinating because we're always sharing our memes, even though it's international. So go figure. So that's all for me. Thanks.
Thanks, Catherine.
Thanks, Catherine.
And both Catherines.
Phil Goldberg says he has a question.
This is for Jack. Jack, you said that the group after 2 years is asking certain questions or raising certain issues. You also said it's been extremely valuable for the past 2 years. So what has been valuable? What have you been doing? Why is it valuable?
Yeah, good question. Let me think about that, put words on it. It feels very potent. It's like transmission on steroids. We hold some kind of a container gets set up, because organically we just meet each other and we all exhale. It's like, and there's something in that nonverbal space. That's what I need. That's what I need. It's, again, because it's women, it's usually an emotional thing that somebody says, I need help with this. And they go for it. So the more extroverted women get their issues brought out. But for me, it's a sense of community. It's a sense of, I have colleagues. I've never been comfortable seeing other spiritual teachers as competitors, even though some do see each other as competitors. It's never sat for me. So I have a sense of being part of a wider container that is non-judgmental, that is a familial touchstone that allows Jack the woman to be there, who happens to be a spiritual teacher. Does that answer the question? Yeah, okay. If we don't have any other questions, Tom, we could.
I just want to suggest that before we break into breakout groups, everyone, if anybody does have a question about what we're supposed to do in them or anything about what's been discussed, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask it.
I have a question for Tom, or maybe the whole group, I'm not sure, but one of the, I was making notes of some of the guidelines of just the kind of start points for everything. And you mentioned for these like test groups, you mentioned gender orientation specific kind of gathering of the groups. And I'm wondering if you can elaborate more on that, to what some of the thinking was behind that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we're open to anything. You know, it could start off with people who already are like, yeah, I have 3 or 4 friends or colleagues, and we want to start something. You know, and just give us a little support, and we're going to make it up. We're going to do whatever we want, and that's great. You know, hopefully we can help you start and help you stay in the loop, so we learn from your experience. The reason I just did it, so it could be any, there's really no fixed idea. The reason I went with the gender is, as Jack said, and Catherine said, there's just all this, obviously all this is changing. What gender is just transforming a lot more quickly than I can keep up with it in our world. But God bless however spirit is moving through the species right now. But for a lot of us, there's just a certain kind of energy with women being with women or men being with men, and it's not true for everybody, but yeah, that's all I can say. So I know that there's something for me. I've been in mixed groups and men's groups, and I just know that for me, just the men's group that I'm in now and others that I have been in, there's just something special about that container. So that's all. It doesn't have to be that way. Yeah, that's all. And there's for most of us, there's certain things we seem to be able to admit to or let down a little more in a certain kind of container. But that's all I'll say about that. Yeah, we're really open for anything.
So Kumi wants to know exactly what we're supposed to do in these. I presume she means in the breakout groups as opposed to the groups in the future that you're talking about.
Yeah, we haven't told you yet. And also, I know from leading other webinar things that you sort of give people some instructions for a breakout group, and everyone gets into the breakout group, and the first thing they say is, wait a minute, what were we supposed to do? So, so because of that, I'm going to put a link in the chat. And this is a link to a Google document that right now is blank, but we're going to paste in there the instructions for the breakout group. So if you want to, you don't have to, but if you want to, that's a place where you can look to get reminded, like, what are we supposed to be doing while we're in these breakout groups? And we'll also paste the question in the chat also. So just in case that helps. So Jack, do you want me to?
Sure, yeah.
To do this? Okay, so I'm going to get my notes and copy this here. All right, so the question for the first breakout group, and this is groups of 4, Groups of 4 for 10 minutes. And the question is, what would it look and feel like for you personally if you were in such a group and it was a successful, positive experience? Okay, so just to give you a larger sense, the second question is like, what kind of fears and concerns come up? But this question is really just to sink into, imagine yourself in some kind of group that would just perfectly meet your needs. And we're not assuming people actually want to be in a group, but if you did, just for the sake of this exercise, and it just felt completely wonderful and supporting and perfect for you, what would that look like? So that's the question. I'll paste it here in the chat, and I'll paste it in that Google document. Okay. So are there any questions about what's going to happen next before Rick breaks this up into groups of 4-ish?
How long are we thinking about being in breakout group?
This will be 10 minutes. And Rick, do you want to send like a 2-minute warning message out?
Yeah, 1 or 2.
Yeah.
I've never done this before, but the instructions look pretty easy, so I'll just set it up.
Okay. Also, if you make me a co-host, I can do it too. I've done it a bunch. So. Annie.
Yeah, am I unmuted? I'm just wondering, maybe I'm being a little too linear about this, but do you think there'll be like a mission statement that will emerge about what the groups represent? Will it be called out of our meetings, or is that too structured for what we're doing? Because I see it as a place of where spiritual teachers can reveal their vulnerabilities, be them, let their hair down, so to speak, in terms of being with their colleagues. Or do you think that's not necessary to have some sort of mission statement that focuses the intent of the group?
I think it would be more, for this one, it would be more like, those would be examples of something you would really like to see. And so you can talk about that. And then after the 10-minute breakout groups, we'll come together and kind of try to call, what we have found.
Right.
This session's being recorded. And then also there's a survey that we'll send out. So actually, if you don't have to worry about getting all your ideas in or out verbally here today.
Right.
We have a survey, and you'll have another opportunity to be very explicit about your ideas.
Okay, I was referring more to an overarching mission statement in terms of, but that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think we would like to have something like that, but today's sort of kind of more
Right, just
brainstorming.
beginning. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go for it, Rick. You're muted, Rick.
Okay, breakout rooms. We're creating 6 of them.
Rick, you're muted.
You muted yourself. Can't hear you.
Uh-oh.
Boom. Alrighty, here they all go. Open all rooms.
So Rick, you're not going to be in one. You'll have to put yourself in one.
I'll figure out how to do that.
Yeah, you hover
So-
over the group name.
So are they open? I should have let you do this, Tom. If you want, I could close them all and then you could do it. You want to do it?
No, we're good. We've started in, so I think we're good. So when you go into the list of groups and you hover over the group name, you'll see a button pop up that says, "I want to join that group." So if
I
you
see
want
that.
to slide
Good.
in.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Georgia. I'm in Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida. Very close to where Jack used to live.
I'm in the Research Triangle in North Carolina.
Okay.
I'm in Fairfield, Iowa.
Great.
Stone, Colorado.
Wow.
Yeah, nice representation.
Woo-woo land.
Time zones. Completely unlike Fairfield.
So I don't, who would like to sort of shepherd this along? Anybody can volunteer, whoever feels like they have the best grasp of what we're supposed to be doing in this.
Well, you would seem to be the one.
I don't know. Why don't you do it, David? You do it.
No.
All right. Well, let's just all.
Do we want to, sorry, that's, do we want timeshares or do we want just spontaneous sharing, or what do y'all want?
Only 5 of us. Let's just do spontaneous. What do you think?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds good.
We're just exploring what this is all about right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the sense I got from the original question is, what do we think that this kind of structure would add to our lives and to our teachings, and support? How would it support and serve us? Is that what you all got from it?
Mm-hmm. What would it look and feel like if this was a success for you?
One thing I wonder is how many people already kind of do something like this informally, just with their circle of peers and friends. Jack was saying a lot of teachers complain that they don't have anything like this and they feel kind of isolated, but what do you all feel like about that point?
Well, I can answer very briefly, aside from the fact that Jack and I every now and then connect. But I am one of the senior teachers in the Naiti Sufi order, and a mentor for students who are becoming reverends or sharags, we call them, within the order. And I'm also on the board. And so as a group, particularly as a board group, we do come together and support each other in a very real way. I think we could do a better job for sure, but there is some sort of a feeling that there's somebody that one can reach out to, talk to, and check in with around whatever comes up. And many things come up, obviously, when you've got a whole lot of students. And so I've always experienced it as something very positive. I felt like, in terms of accountability, it's nice to have an overarching sense of what is required and a respect for what that might feel like. But it's also nice, as Jack was saying, just to have a space where you can say, you know what, I'm going through stuff. So, the whole counter-transference world. Or I see some of my students who are really contracted around an issue, and what way do you approach working with this? So it's nice to have a sense of a broadening of scope, not only within a specific paradigm. I love that we all come from a different paradigm.
And speaking of those different paradigms, it seems like the group experience that you're talking about is more familiar in lineages, and there are more and more people who are spontaneously awakening or have come through newer, less structured lineages and practices. And so I think there are more people out there who are not engaged in a lineage that has something like oversight and a peer group. At least that's the way it seems.
Yeah, and to be perfectly frank and honest with you, I'm not a person who is lineage oriented. And a lot of my, Sufism is a very interesting paradigm because you can be very lineage oriented or not. For me, it's much more a state of realization than anything else. So I have students who are bucking the lineage and some who are really, really tapping into it very deeply. And it's an interesting dynamic to hold those two. Have some people sort of shake them and say, let loose a little, and others say, okay, don't be so loosey-goosey around things. But this discussion, that comes up.
I would say just on a personal, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, what is everybody else's experience?
Just like speaking off the cuff and from the heart, like what would it look and feel like if it was a success for me? I think, you know, just establishing a really safe space, like a safety, a container where I felt like I could show up vulnerably and very honestly, and have the container be non-judgmental, and yeah, just setting up some guidelines, I guess, for safety for everybody. And yeah, just being able to show up with whatever is present for me at that time. And perhaps, as you were saying, Laurel, also bringing to the table if I'm having some difficulty with a particular client, just being able to bounce that off of the group and get feedback when needed.
I would definitely second and third all of that. One of the nice things about being in Crestone from time to time, woo-woo or otherwise, is there's quite a diversity of teachers and practitioners and leaders and all kinds of identifications and denominations. So I really appreciate what happens when there is a kind of emergent ad hoc community, and the sharing and the deepening of wisdom that occurs. The other day I was with, I think it's fine to say this, Sharon Landreth, just after lunch, and we had a great conversation, and she remembers, Rick, your invitation to ASI, and we'll circle back to you. And just the level of the conversation and the connection was so nourishing. So what I'm feeling into is the possibility that this could be other than ad hoc, that it could be intentional and there could be a heartbeat for gathering. And with that consistency, I feel that there would be even greater deepening. And I feel the loving presence aspect, holding all of us. And then there's this wild card, which is what happens when several are gathered. And I feel like there's almost another order of consciousness, a kind of collective awakening that can occur when the individual currents come together. So a little bit like a conscious superorganism, although that sounds very jargony. So I'm really kind of excited to explore what might be possible beyond what I can even imagine here.
I also think it might be nice to have some type of structure or a topic at hand, you know, some kind of theme, I guess, to get us going, possibly, you know, each month or each time we meet, if there was like, I don't know, an underlying theme or something that we would discuss, or we just keep it open. Actually, either one would be nice, but
I think there are usual issues that come up with doing this kind of work that don't necessarily have obvious answers, right? In other words, we've got a code of ethics, and I think everybody here wants to follow that as nearly as possible. But as Tom was saying, in the actual practice, these things get sort of ambiguous, and being able to talk about that kind of ambiguity with others who experience the interaction with students and living your normal, quote unquote, normal life while you do this, I think that's a really valuable thing. But at the same time, I agree with you that there are specific topics that may not come up. I think Jack sort of dragged me into this work, although I've taught for many, many years, brought me into ASI because I was raising the question, what do we do about the world? What is the role, the ethical role of the spiritual teaching community, given the crises that we're seeing in the world. That's a topic. And yet it may not be the sort of thing that one cogitates on during the week. So yeah, there could be all kinds of topics that may or may not come up in your normal work. And then there's all these other things that do come up in your normal work.
I think it's been oops, am I unmuted? Yeah, it's been about 11 minutes and Tom said 10, so I better end this and see what's going on. I think he's going to do a second breakout group before we're done here. So let me just.
Thank you, everyone.
Say, close
Thank you.
all. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we have another 57 seconds if anybody wants to say something. It's going to end in about 57 seconds.
Cool.
Well, I just wanted to say that I love both the ideas, you know, that perhaps, and obviously it will depend on what's really coming up in the moment and honoring that, but perhaps there can in a group be time for a common question and then for people to express their own, whatever's happening for them.
Mm. Yeah, and for 2020, once a month, I led a sharing circle for a group of women, about 10. And there would be a prompt, but there was always the invitation to use the prompt and or just talk about what's up for you. So we actually could have both each time, you know, and then whoever felt called to use the prompt used it.
Group members just came in after.
Hi, Chris.
Hi, Catherine. Hi, Tom. Where's Tom? Hi, Tom.
I am here.
Right. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of Tom Whalen. Forgive me. Hi, Tom Murray.
My peer soup colleagues, Tom and Chris, Tom Whalen and Chris Thomas.
Good.
And I'm exceedingly jealous of the blue sky behind Catherine's head.
All right, Tom, what next? Or Jack?
Tom?
Jack? No. Let's just hear from people. Yeah. What came up? How would you summarize your own reflections or your group's reflections? Let's see. Yeah, let's
People who just unmute themselves and just don't all speak at once.
yeah, and maybe we'll do this for 5 or 7 minutes and then move on to what's next.
So we're doing this popcorn style. So I'm gonna assume I can talk on behalf of my 3 colleagues to meet every 2 weeks. That it would be a call to be transparent with each other, rotating leadership with guidelines of what that leadership would involve, and that it would be very understood that we would be letting our guard down and being fully human. I hope I've gotten the gist of my group.
Thanks, Jack.
And actually, hi everyone, it's Celia. I was in Jack's group. We didn't get to the second question, so we didn't get to address what kind of fears and concerns come up. And so I've just been trying to think of what those might be. And
so
Celia, far, nothing has come up.
Yeah, no, there was only one question for this group. That second question is for the next breakout group. So you're all set.
I'll try to summarize what our group discussed. I think we had 2 main themes. One was that we really want this to be a safe space, a really nicely held container where we can show up vulnerably with whatever is present. And the other thing we discussed was the possibility of having like a prompt or a theme to discuss, and also the possibility of not using that prompt and just really addressing whatever is present for one in the moment, receiving help from the group. I don't know if did I get that right? Do y'all want to add anything? Okay.
Ragda, can I ask, the prompt or the theme would be as a backup? Is that what you're saying? Is it that it's the personal is the first agenda, and then if nobody has anything, the prompt comes in?
Equally as valid and important. So we can co-create some ideas that we want to bring to the table and discuss. And if somebody wants to speak on that, great. And if somebody just has something else that's really pressing and present for them, then they're free to speak on that as well. So like you can have a prompt and you can choose to speak on it, or if you have something other that's pressing, you speak on that.
I'd love to see how that would work. I have no experience of how that would work, because for me, there are two very different types of meetings. Yeah, I have no idea how that would work.
I did this in my sharing circle, in a sharing circle last year, once a month, all of 2020.
Great.
And it was great because it gives you something, you know, that you can look at cohesively as a group and ponder and think about, and then, you know, share if you wish. Or if there's something really that's on your heart, that's really, you know, and you just don't want to mess with the prompt, then be free to do that too.
And it works.
It worked great. Yeah.
Wow, that's great. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we followed what we were supposed to do. We, Catherine, I don't know what you think, but we kind of just described how we came to this, and it was kind of that getting to know each other. Unfortunately, we didn't really, although Catherine had some really valid points about how she's kept herself feeling in integrity with her clients and using, what did you call it, Catherine? I've forgotten it. You described how you, yeah.
Oh, the peer soup, you mean the group?
Yeah. You
Just reflections, yeah. Well, actually, one of the questions that you brought up, Annie, which I thought was valid, actually, Luann mentioned too, is that not everybody here is a teacher or a leader in that way, and yet how could this be valuable for those people as well? That was one of the questions that we were kind of starting to address.
Yeah. And and my sense is, even if you don't have a traditional role as because I'm sure we all spiritually express through whatever we do, and we might not recognize how we do that so much, but it seems to me that it's valuable insofar as if we've been in spiritual community a lot in this life, we recognize the foibles, and we'll have some repository of wisdom around that we can possibly contribute. That's what kind of came to me. But in terms of actually the focus of the group, we really didn't get there. So sorry about that, everybody. We had a good time.
I could say a little bit, sort of following up on that from Annie. In our conversations, we sort of have pictured that there's kind of a continuum from, like, on one side, it's more of a light kind of professional club, you know, where you get together and talk about themes. And, but really, and so, you know, it's possible that at the ASI can support that kind of, you know, professional peer, you know, gathering. But really, you know, we're kind of focused on the theme of integrity, and as really where the gold is. And so, you know, over time, hopefully groups would develop more trust, or maybe some groups would just dive right in to start off. But when you're talking about themes, you know, as we all know, they're often, issues come up and they're about other people, you know, and nobody, you know, if there's not a structure for it, it's hard break out of that theme that's a very general and say, whoa, this is really tough for me, what we're talking about. And this is my experience and this is where I screwed up or whatever. So there's a whole question of how to transition a group. Each group is different, but hopefully getting to that place. So like I'll just say in my men's group, for instance, we started off with sort of like themed kind of stuff about 5 or 6 years ago. And now what we do is we start with it's like a 2.5 hour meeting and there's 8 of us. And we start with a 5-minute check-in with each person. And then we decide who's really got something up that they need support with, they have a lot of energy around. And we split up the time so that, maybe certain people get more time than others. And so we divvy up the whole time. And then, we have enough trust so that somebody can say to somebody, hey, you're being awfully quiet today. You said you didn't want any time, but in your 5-minute check-in, I just noticed, like, it seems like, what's up with that thing, and the next thing you know, the person is like, oh, and they're taking time to really go deep and get some support with something they didn't think they wanted to or could talk about. So that's kind of a vision that I have, but it can take a while to get there, and it's also an example of another kind of structure.
Well, in our group, we spent some time introducing ourselves, where we're from, and we discovered that we're in 3 quite different modes, I would say, of counseling, or, well, not counseling, but of spiritual work. One in yoga, one in body work, one in spiritual direction, one in, well, I didn't get to say actually that I'm in training with the Hayden Institute, and I'm very, very new to this. So I'm 2 of the 3 people expressed an interest, I'd say. Maybe all 3 expressed an interest in going further in such a group, although one person acknowledged that they were already part of a peer group. I do remember a comment that because so much socially is up these days, good heavens, I mean, it's that they would value a place where they could sort of learn to be resourced for coping with those for coping with those areas, or have I managed to tangle the 2 together? please correct me.
Hi, in terms of the resourcing that I was speaking to, it feels like now is the time that we really need to be speaking from truth. So it's like wanting a group where I get more practice in that, so that what I speak is coming from a resourced place within, a deeper place.
Oh.
And that it's not so much that so just what I was referring to is I feel like it's time that need to be looking at these issues that are starting to arise, and when talking with just in social settings, that I'm not hiding away like I've always had before.
Is it time to move on?
Yeah, is there any group that hasn't been represented in feedback?
I just wanted to share from our group that, you know, came up that in addition, you know, the gender breakout was just one possible idea. And, you know, we were talking about organizing people also according to tradition and, you know, which profession and things like that. So that's certainly also possible.
If I could speak to that briefly, yeah, I think that would be interesting. That there'd be kind of just more ability to kind of self-select for others that have like similar interests or a similar tradition. Just because kind of the doubt that came up for me is like, oh well, you know, would I gel with this group? And if it's too spread out, you know, like yoga teachers, like, you know, body workers, meditation teachers, then I think there wouldn't be sufficient in common. So.
Thanks, Cedric. I think that is important.
Yeah, I like to have a feeling of belonging. Yeah, it feels safer.
Good. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Timothy. So let's do another round and see what comes up. I'll just read the next question. And we'll do another 10 minutes. And this time, let's see. I was thinking groups of 3 for some reason, Rick. And so the question is, what concerns or tensions come up for you? That's basically it. What concerns or tensions come up for you around this project? You know, it's kind of as you imagine yourself or even other people in it. And I just want to say, we want to make an invitation for people to kind of sense into what's coming up in the moment as we talk about this. That's a good place to start. Like, this is what I was feeling.
Oh my God.
In my body as you know, as I was imagining being in a group. These are the kinds of fears that come up. So it's not, we're not really trying to, you know, create a space for long stories of terrible things that happened to you in the past or that you heard about. So it's not a space for that. It's more kind of just what's up in the moment, but also just general kinds of concerns and tensions that you're feeling around this that can help us steer things in the right direction.
Can I ask a question for clarification?
Yeah, thanks, Philip.
When you say what concerns come up, are you talking about concerns around being in a group or concerns about the project that you and Jack are undertaking here?
It's about the project, but also if you have like you can say, well, what came up for me is, you know, it's hard, it might be hard for me to trust a group for this kind of reason. You know, probably other people would share that kind of concern too. And, you know, you might have a suggestion for how to make that concern, alleviate that concern as well. So, yeah, so I think it's kind of both. It's kind of sourcing what might come up for you if you imagine being in a group. And I just want to say, we're not trying to convince or enroll all of you here to be in a group. That's not at all what we're doing. We're just like brainstorming as a community for how to set this up for whoever steps forward to be interested. We're not at all trying to push this on anybody. So, but did that answer your question, Philip?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm going to put the question both in the chat and in that other document. And whoops. It says both 10 and 15 minutes, but it's 10 minutes. There's a typo in there. Did I do it? Right. Okay, good. I didn't, okay, I fixed the typo. There it is. Okay, Rick, are you ready to?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and do it this time? You're a co-host.
All right. All right, so now I have to think for a second. How many of us are there? 5, 10, 15, 20.
There's 24.
24.
24.
And that's 8 groups if you want to have 3.
8 groups. Okay, let's give it a try. Whoops. Are you sure I'm a co-host?
You are, but I can see you there as co-host. But let me go ahead.
Yep.
I'll just go ahead and do it if you're having trouble.
Yeah, I'm not seeing the right button here.
I'll do it. So I'm going to make 8 groups.
Okay, thanks. Sorry.
Okay. Oh.
You did great last time.
Yeah. Is it working? There. Okay. I joined this one because it only had 2 people in it. So there's the 3 of us.
Cool.
So my main concern is that I've always got so much going on that I kind of feel like it would be difficult for me to take the time to do this. And there'd just be distractions and interruptions on this end. That's my thought. Although it might be valuable, and also this kind of stuff kind of happens in my life anyway, sort of with various people, but maybe I'm missing something, and obviously there would be benefit to it if I did it, but that's my main concern.
Nothing yet for me. I kind of have to settle into the whole notion of, being in the group. Well, I guess, the first thing that comes up for me is what is so important is having the group be coming from more of an embodied place, and that we really landed in ourselves and we're speaking from what is arising in the moment. Yeah. It's like, I'd be afraid that it would be too much. This is what happens sometimes, the groups, I want something that's resourced like that, not a typical conversation that I could have elsewhere. And I'd be concerned about potentially too much structure, that it wasn't a place that would allow for what was arising.
Yeah, well, I think we can share here just concerns that we have about the whole, that could be related to other people, to in general, for how to set, basically under the category of things that could go wrong if we set up, these kinds of groups, things that we want to think about ahead of time. 'Cause I know one thing that comes up for me is like, people have a large range of skills in terms of, I guess, just their self-awareness of being in groups. And I think, Karen, this is some of what you were pointing to, like, being self-aware when you're off on a story and not really being present to yourself or what's in the moment, or, not being sort of skilled in using I statements and, you know, so how, you know, I've been in groups where someone will share something, and you know, ideally, people will be sharing like what comes up from them without a lot of judgment and without a lot of advice giving, you know. But sometimes those are skills that take a while to learn and to kind of catch yourself. So, you know, sometimes people would get into just giving advice, and that's usually not what somebody wants to hear. Sometimes it is, but yeah, it's often not what someone wants to hear. They just want to be heard, you know, or hear how their sharing has impacted other people. That can be very sort of healing and opening. But yeah, those are some things that come up for me as sort of yeah. For the first few, we really want them to go well, right? So how to do that without, on the one hand, having too much structure, as you were talking about, Karen, but also trying to have enough skill in the room, you know. I mean, I think probably with the first groups that we try, we would lean towards picking people that already have maybe a little bit of experience doing groups, and that would be more likely to, you know, support success in the first few prototype groups. But we're not sure yet.
In other words, in each of these prototype groups, you'd have one or two people who had experience with it to help to guide it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, if we got, I don't know how many people will say who are actually interested, but you know, if we got 30 people that said they were interested in, and we had to choose, you know, 10 for the first groups, we might err on the side of people who had already had some experience in groups. Because it can be hard to be in a group where there's like one or two people who are just very not conscious, you know, of how they influence other people. And yeah, so yeah. So
if there were 30 people who said they were interested, why would you choose only 10? Do you mean that you would sprinkle the 10 among all the groups? But I mean, all 30 people would be able to be in one if they said they were interested, right? But you're just saying you would apportion the 10 experienced people among however many groups were formed?
Well, I mean, that's possible, but it's not what I'm thinking. I'm thinking we would really only start with 2 or 3 groups and just like settle into that experience for the first round, and then get back to people, you know, for the next round and open it up larger. But really, you know, because things, you know, to be honest, things can go really wrong, you know, in groups. People can get hurt. People can say, really bare their heart. And, you know, some people can trust, come in with total trust that's not really appropriate to this group of people that just met, that bare their heart and get really hurt, you know. So we want to kind of set up the first few so that we, you know, yeah, we've got a little bit more biased, you know, towards people who have some experience in groups and who feel confident that they can stand on their own. You know, there might be other people that are like, I'm interested, but I'm really concerned that the group is very well facilitated for me to feel safe. And then we might say, maybe we'll wait for round 2 for that person, you know?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Have you talked about who would be welcome to join a group?
No, we're just looking, we're going to put out this survey, and anyone who's interested will let us know, and we'll ask them what their background is and what their needs are, and we'll just try to we'll just try to, match people up and just we want to just start with a couple of 2 or 3 groups, like we said, and then expand it out more from there. We don't have
ASI members, presumably.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking like somebody that would come to ASI has been exposed to spiritual. I'm jumping ahead here, and I guess making assumptions that people would have a lot of these skills, or that I'm thinking too, Tom, I'm kind of like all over the place. So, but let me just go with what I was thinking. I think you mentioned something about dialogue, Tom, that you've been involved with dialogue. I mean, I was years ago, but it seemed, and worked with a peer group where we used some basic dialogue guidelines that I must have pulled off the website or something. And that was enough that we got together just fine. I mean, but it's a constant evolution of what's truth. What do I feel comfortable sharing? Yeah.
I didn't notice what time we started, Tom. Has it been 10 minutes?
Oh, yeah, it's been about 10.
All right.
We give.
So should we break out? I mean, there's when you end the thing, it gives you a countdown of like 60 seconds. Are people supposed to just leave, or should they wait for that countdown? They can just leave if they want to, right? And they'll get back to the main group.
Yeah, but usually what happens is people wait and out. They finish their conversation over that 60 seconds, and then they get kicked out. They automatically pop out, so it's okay.
All right, I'll start that then now. Boom. All right, now we've got our 60 seconds going. And everybody gets a notice when you do that, right?
Yeah, that same notice you're looking at is what we are.
Yeah. Okay, good. Anyway, I don't have anything more to say at the moment, but does anybody? I guess one thought that popped in my head is that if you make it a little bit exclusive, like 30 people want to do it, but we're only going to start with 10, then perhaps that's a good thing in a way, because sometimes when something is a little bit, you can't quite get it, then there's more of a desire to have it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. I hope it doesn't feel exclusive, but we want to be more like careful.
Yeah.
With the first ones.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But that is an issue that.
Kind of like the vaccine, you want to have some test groups before you give it to everybody.
Right. The sturdiest guinea pigs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here we all are. I remember Catherine Schultz's little friend. She came in on the Swami Sarvapriyananda thing. He got a kick out of it too.
Well, there's only 10 minutes left in our time together. So I want to check in with Jack to see, we want to have a little check-in here, but how much time do we want to leave to close out? And
it's really valuable, I think, to get feedback from this think tank, which is how I perceive it today.
Yeah.
I think we really need to hear what people's concerns are. That's a huge learning curve for us. So I'm all for it. And if it's an abrupt closing, I apologize already for it. But let's go. Let's get some feedback.
Okay. Well, in case there is an abrupt closing, I'll just say that we'll be sending everyone a link to a survey, and we hope that you're even if you're not interested in joining a group, there are questions in that survey where you can share your ideas for us. So
will you send the survey to all the ASI members, or just to the people who were in this meeting?
To all the ASI members. Good. I'll send it to Jack and you guys.
It'll be about a week though. Yeah.
Annie.
Yeah, I just thought there were some really valuable points that came up in my little group, and I was the note taker. So that people are authentically committed to be there, that there has to be confidentiality. I kind of assumed that, but that was voiced. Also, be careful of a dominance in the group, because somebody's there with an ulterior motive to to market their own, whatever they do, or they're not there purely for that peer-to-peer support and offering a safe place to hear each other out about concerns. And also, this is humorous, an escape clause. And if you find that actually it's not serving you, one of the members mentioned wanting to be able to gracefully exit if needed. So those are just some of the points that were brought up. If anybody else wants to chime in if I missed anything.
Next feedback person.
I can speak for our group. So yeah, we had voiced some excitement and some concerns. So the main concern was the time commitment, because everybody in the group felt like this was a important, and actually, you know, they wanted to be here wholeheartedly, fully present, and you know, bring the energy into the group. So, but the commitment of every 2 weeks seemed like a bit much. So there was some discussion about every month, like, you know, there was a point made that maybe every month would be doable. And the other thing was, you know, how to balance a flexibility of being able to attend, but also being committed to the group and the ongoing progress. So that's something that maybe we need to play around with. So the other concern was that the whole idea of different practices coming together. And whereas we all felt that that was an important part of the whole discussion, is we want to be able to learn from each other and grow and evolve with each other, but it might shake up people's pre-existing notions of how things work. So that's may come up, like, you know, it might challenge people to be able to look at things differently. So how do we navigate that? But I think everybody agreed that that was part of the important work, that, you know, not to segregate ourselves into different pockets, but actually be able to discuss things across practices. And third is just, you know, how to be vulnerable among other people that you respect and admire. So I'll just throw that in there too.
Jack and I were in the same group, so you have this, Jack, but just for others, also confidentiality was mentioned as being not just important, but a fear that if that's not in place, what that can, the consequences of that, that there be that it not just be an opportunity to chit chat and, you know, be in a chat room, but that there is sort of a shared understanding of depth and not sort of operating on a surface level would be, you know, or that it would become that, I suppose, was a concern. And another concern, just the ability to show up, and if the group itself, the topics, that vulnerability, being around people you admire, is bringing up stuff, the ability to self-regulate, you know, the ability to manage that stuff so that the group is not necessarily supporting you for that, but for other broader issues that you're bringing for peer support. Thanks.
And I would add that ditto to everything that has been said so far, and so I'll just add a little spin on a couple of things from our group. We talked a lot about concerns regarding fit, proper fit, which could go to diversity or more homogenous or whatever, and also to value. And we spent a lot of time talking about value because of the time commitment, and also some concerns that perhaps it could go off into a professional networking group as opposed to the topic, which is spiritual integrity. So that however the groups are structured, that it always come back to that core of spiritual integrity. And there could be a lot of variations around that topically and else in other ways, but that it always circles around spiritual integrity. And also enough container to be able to add value, and enough flexibility so that you have both that kind of feminine flexibility and that masculine structure to both dance with each other. Otherwise, you lose value either way.
Oh, there was one additional point I forgot, and that is just in a group, one or two people, I think Jack alluded to this, tend to be more extroverted and just speak more, and to try to allay that, if it becomes it gets wonky sometimes, and just to have maybe something in place that will, ameliorate that possibility, make it less possible. But that's just a typical group dynamic, I think. Yeah.
Catherine, you have your hand raised. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just trying to kind of summarize that the ideas that probably both groups I was in were having a tension between like the maturity within the people. So like Patricia Albert's ideas with mutual awakening of who's in the room matters. And then to some degree, she's created rules and a structure to allow for that. But then other times I once was in a group, the one group I facilitated, where it took us a year and we finally were like, there's this one member who we just can't work with. And, like you're saying, the easy exit. But then in this particular organization, people were like, say they're meditators or their yoga or their spiritual practices, wanting, some people were expressing an interest in having a diverse group. And then some people were saying, I'd like to just be with more of my specific peers so I can go deeper into the integrity of my orientation and practice. So somehow trying to reconcile what the interests are. I was almost envisioning like an Airbnb experience map or menu, and people can be picking where they might want to land. And then also the smaller group or something where there's just the conscious company of an ability of creating resonance for the meme of the moment versus facilitated structure and deeper learning, whatever might be. So there's kind of tensions happening that have concerns within each area and how to structure it for, the meeting all those needs.
I see themes emerging, definitely. Picking up on what Celia said about dominant people in the group. I was with Mark and Luann, and his concern was being in groups where people were too sure of themselves and sort of dominated things from their own point of view. Luann was more concerned with people not being willing to be open. And there's certainly a similarity in that. Mark pointed out that he had been in a group and there was a woman from Japan, I believe, who said that she would have difficulty being in a support group with people from the Abrahamic traditions. It was so different from her own. So there's the issue of, do we break them out into specific lineages and that kind of thing? I guess my concern would be whether people were willing to go deeper or whether it remained sort of a professional level, which has value in itself, but that would be my interest. And so I forget who it was that raised the issue, how would the groups be formed? Just dropping people into groups like we did today probably was not the way. So there would have to be a method. I think that covers most everything, guys.
Okay, Ragda and Timothy have their hands raised.
Yeah. Should I go? That also, what you said, David, applies to beginner or professional status. Being a beginner, it'd be nice to not to be the only beginner in a group. You can see where that might lead to some unusefulness on my part. And then in its opposite, I wouldn't want the group to be all beginners, because we could certainly use the advice of someone with experience. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, we talked a lot about confidentiality already, and I've been in a number of groups like this with an organization that I've been really involved in for the last couple of years. And one thing that is a pressing kind of like agreement is also just no gossiping. And that's just something that hasn't been mentioned, but it's something that is really important. No gossiping either inside or outside of the group. And it's just nice to kind of know that that is an intention for everybody.
Every group has been represented for feedback? Guess so. Tom, do you want to, I'm just conscious we're gone 4 minutes over. Do you want to pull it together?
No, I think this has been awesome. I think the conversation has met and surpassed our wildest expectations. And I'll let you close this out, Jack.
I'm not going to impeach any more of your time. I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you for coming today and for being open and honest and for helping co-create all of this. Our administrator is away this week, and so we have to wait for her to send out the survey in terms of ideas that you might have. I didn't say that on the spot. You know how things cook. And so in about a week's time, you'll get an online survey from us. And if you have further thoughts, please, we'd love to hear from you, because the more information we have, this shorter our learning curve around setting up these models. So thank you, and see you in 6 weeks thereabouts for the next webinar.